Hey guys, Lewis here. I have one of Element Inspection inspectors here with me, and I'm going to ask you a few questions. One of them being, first and foremost, what are the expectations of an inspector's perhaps knowledge and limitations as to what you would expect when you get an inspection? How detailed are you supposed to be? Are you supposed to diagnose every little problem, or broad overview?
The best broad overview is the best way I can explain it to the client is we are kind of we're not professional electricians or plumbers or HVAC technicians, so we're a very broad scope.
Almost like a general doctor, general practitioner.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, not a proctologist or
Right.
a hand doctor.
We're not specialists.
Right, yes.
We are broad spectrum. Our goal is to identify if there is an issue, not to diagnose it or solve it, or and then so once we evaluate and discover an issue, then we suggest who the next step should be.
Yeah, I've brought that up multiple times to agents. It's not the foot specialist. The general practitioner or the general diagnostician says, there's a problem with your foot, I don't know what the problem is. I know there's a problem, so I'm going to send you to my specialist.
Right.
And you do the exact same thing.
Pretty much, yes, exactly. So
you look at an oven.
Yeah. If there's a hole in the roof, I'm not going to fix it, and
Right.
I'm going to tell you need to call a roofer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or if the oven doesn't go to 350 degrees when I have
Right,
it
it gets
set,
up to like 200 degrees.
yeah, then
You don't know why it's not getting to
Exactly.
350.
Right.
It only got to 200, but you know it's supposed to get to 350.
Yeah.
And that's not something that a home buyer would necessarily check when they're walking through the home.
Right.
Did the oven get hot enough? That's your job.
Yeah.
And then you say, small appliance technician, come out, take a look at it.
Right. And then that's when it's, the other one, some of the other expectations that I hear a lot is, how old is a roof? Well, I'm not a specialist. I have no real way of telling you. I can give you a very vague proximity.
A ballpark, yeah.
But, and it's, I get, for instance, let's say the hot water heater's going out. Well, how much is that going to be to replace that? Again, I might be able to give you a broad spectrum of an idea, but you really need to contact a licensed plumber. And licensed is also very, very important.
Right.
Don't.
Well, you have a license yourself.
Correct.
But it's the general diagnostician license that Texas Real Estate Commission's professional inspector.
Well, and I say that the license is important because you just don't want to hire, you don't want to go to Home Depot at 6 o'clock in the morning and get that guy on the curb to come out and, work on your HVAC system, unless he has a license.
Yeah.
But it's, I also tell my clients in a lot of cases that I'm hesitant to say rely on the seller to take care of this, because the seller is going to go to Home Depot and get that guy off the curb.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, unfortunately. I've told people, your condenser's dirty, there's dirt packed in the fins, and they, the seller goes out there with his garden hose and sprays it out.
Calls it good.
And says, oh yeah, the system was overhauled. Mm-hmm. No, it wasn't.
So you're saying, in a generality, you're going to go out, you're going to find as many things wrong with the property, and then you're going to have a laundry list of the people that should really come out
Precisely.
and inspect
in a
it
nutshell,
fully, and then diagnose the problem and say, this is what it'll cost to remedy what your inspector found.
Right.
Got it.
Pretty much. So, there's what we call the big five: roof, foundation, HVAC, electrical, plumbing.
Yeah.
So those are the 5 specialists in most cases that we're going to recommend.
Got it. Perfect. Why do we use thermal imaging cameras?
Thermal imaging cameras are to detect possible issues. One of the biggest uses I get out of them is the electrical panel.
Okay.
So I'm taking a snapshot of the electrical panel to find out if there's any hot spots. Do I have a breaker that's over 140 degrees?
Overheated circuit.
Exactly. So if it's at that 140 and plus marker, we've got an issue. And it's potentially a very hazardous issue.
And tell me if this is true, because all it's doing is telling temperature differences.
Correct.
But then you can use that information and then your detective skills of being an inspector to go in and say, okay, there's, clearly a very cold spot. It's cold outside and the heater's on. Now I have a decent idea that we're missing insulation or that air is seeping through somewhere, and then you can go further investigate. It tells you, proves nothing, but it gives you that quick glance as to what might need further investigation.
Right. Yeah. And then sometimes it does tell you without question.
Yeah.
If, for instance, I'm running the hot water in a drain and all of a sudden I see a pool below the sink that's bright red, we've got a leak.
Hot water's leaking out.
Yeah.
Got it.
So
great tool.
it's very handy for sure. Yeah, for sure.
And you use it on every single inspection, don't you?
Absolutely, yes. And especially for HVAC vents, to make sure that, first of all, that the heaters or the AC is working, and second of all, that vent's actually getting the correct amount of air.
Proper air and temperature. Yeah.
Correct.
Cool. No, it's a great tool. We'll roll in a couple of clips of you using it so people can see, but it's good stuff.
Yeah, it's really handy.
Cool. All right. All right, we're going to talk about sewer scopes, and no better expert than an actual licensed home inspector, Adam Jones here. So I always tell people houses built 1990 and previous have a high likelihood of having cast iron. Any cast iron plumbing system has a 30 to 50 year life cycle, and when it fails, if it's underneath a slab foundation, it can be 20, 30, sometimes $50,000.
Oh,
You
yeah.
got to trench a 4x4 hole underneath the foundation so a man can fit under there with new pipe, pull out the old, put the new pipe in. So how is it that you, as an inspector, diagnose a pipe that is completely underground and invisible?
Well, we use a device, it's a sewer scope.
Okay.
So it's a camera on a long cable. Cable's about 100 feet. So that is a restriction, at least for my camera anyway. There are some cameras out there that are, there's different brands,
I assume
different
it's
lengths.
obviously not like a USB cable. It's a stiff
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're pushing it into the drain.
Correct. Yeah, it's not, they do make what's called a crawler, but the one, in particular, the one I use is on a long, stiff cable in a reel. Cameras, about, that big around,
Yeah.
about the size of a quarter. And we're going through the clean out, ideally, God willing. There's a clean out at ground level. I've done multiple houses, especially 60s and earlier. They didn't have clean outs. It was
Right.
cast iron and they didn't have clean outs. Or if they did, it maybe goes one direction, never two.
Yeah.
Modern clean outs are U-shaped, so it's a little counterintuitive. The one closest to the house actually leads to the city. The one furthest from the house actually goes under the house.
And then you go under the house.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at as much of the system as you can.
And again, mine's not a crawler. I can't make turns.
Right.
So I'm following the main sewer lateral.
Yep.
I can't go off to, a split to sometimes a different portion of the house or that particular fixture.
But when you're in the main sewer line, you're going to see tree roots growing in.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see a full collapse of a cast iron system if that's the case.
Or cracks.
Cracks in it. So you get to identify, because it's a camera with an LED on it, so it sees directly into the pipe.
And it's a pretty good, clear picture.
Yeah, and you can see it even if it's separated.
Absolutely.
Because even if the system is not broken in any way, like none of the pipes are compromised, sometimes they separate as the earth moves.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're just filling up your backyard full of sludge.
Or you're filling up the pipe full of sludge.
Yeah, and then it backs up into the house.
Exactly. Yeah, if you first go down a pipe and you see dirt, mud in that pipe, that's a clear indicator that there's probably an issue right away somewhere.
I always tell people this is probably the single best possible inspection you can do, because it's arguably one of the most expensive parts. Roof and sewer are very expensive.
Yep.
Right? You're already going to be on the roof, but people oftentimes say, no, I don't want a sewer scope. It's a $200 add-on,
Right.
and you can save $30,000.
Yeah.
So,
And even on a brand new build.
yeah.
One of my favorite stories, I was doing a brand new build and I went into the clean out and immediately my camera just hit black and stopped. I'm like, well, that's odd.
Brand new home.
Brand new home, hadn't even been moved into yet. So I pull my camera out and I get my flashlight out and I look down there and I see something. So naturally I put on rubber gloves.
Yeah.
And I'm able to put my hand down in there and it's the test ball that they'd
test
left. And when I pulled that test ball out, obviously they'd been using, the workers had been using the restroom, and it just was whoosh. And if I hadn't done that, if they hadn't done the sewer scope, that would have easily backed up into the house and caused untold problems.
The perfect storm story of that is always, you turn the dishwasher on, you went upstairs to go to bed, and you're taking a shower, and because you're upstairs and that water's stacking up, it's going to start flowing out of any drain that's lower than the second story. And a lot of people don't. So the dishwasher starts draining, and you're taking a shower, and the house, because they left that equipment in there, the house starts filling up with sewage water.
Yep.
And then you got to move out of your house, get an insurance claim, and all that because the builder forgot to remove the test ball.
Right. Which is just...
And you wouldn't have known that until you move in.
Exactly. But the other scenario on new builds is, they don't cap those. They're supposed to, but they don't always cap those drains when they're, after they pour the slab. This is pre-drywall.
Yeah.
And they've got those drains there, and all untold things can go down those. And
we found on one of them. It's always like a masonite product, a masonry product. So, like you're talking about, there's supposed to be a little cover to protect it. But they were building the master shower, and the thin set, the tile adhesive, all that's going down this drain, and it hardened down there, and we found it after the fact. We were called in after to discover what the problem was. But the person started the shower. First day ever moving in, started the shower, let it warm up, and by the time they came back in, the whole bathroom had flooded.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, it's just, you can't be too careful.
Yeah.
And it's...
And a sewer scope, for a nominal fee,
right,
finds all of that.
Yes. And it's that way I explain it to my clients is it's that ability to sleep at night concept.
Yep.
Okay, all right, great. I spent $200. I found absolutely nothing wrong, but I'm going to sleep tonight.
Exactly.
So, or I spent $200 on a new build, and now the builder has to come in and replace the pipe from the house to the city because there's 3 breaks in it, or it's separated, or whatever the case may be.
So yeah, money well spent. I recommend that one above any other product that we offer. Get the sewer scope. So it's disappointing when they decline it, but.
Well, and it's, I hate to be that guy because, in so many cases too, it's a beautiful house. It's what they want. It's perfect. And I get down there and it's cast iron and there's linear cracks all the way down it. And, it hasn't failed, but it's gonna.
They hate hearing the news.
Right.
But they love you for it.
I hate giving the news.
Yeah.
More than anything. It breaks my heart because I want to see them in this house. And, what I tell them is like, look, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but there's a house out there for you. I don't recommend this one. No.
Well,
it is what it is.
You gotta do it.
Yeah. No.
So get your sewer scopes.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, and it's they look crestfallen at first, and they start thinking about it. They're like, oh, thank God.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely get the sewer scope. Worth every penny.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. What are the big 5, and why is it that we spend so much time and energy on that and such little time and energy on everything else?
Well, I wouldn't say that we spend less time and energy on everything else, but these are the 5 major components of the home. The five that are going to be the most costly, and those are the roof, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, and foundation.
Okay. Obviously, everyone wants to know foundation. Is the house going to fall over? How many times have you heard, does the house have good bones?
I hear that a lot. I actually use that a lot.
Okay.
I do. I use that a lot. For instance, my house is 101 years old this year.
Right.
And it has good bones. I'm very blessed. I've had very few problems with it. But, these are the 5 big components, and those are the 5 things that people are usually the most concerned about.
Right.
Is the roof going to leak? Is the plumbing going to leak? Is the electrical going to start a fire? Is the house going to fall over because of the foundation?
Yeah, I find very few people are concerned that a door latch is maybe a little too loose. Okay, I can fix that with a screwdriver.
Right.
But when you say, hey, the HVAC system is 16 years old and it's just not cooling the way I think it should, raise the concern because that's a $10,000 repair if it needs to
least.
be replaced.
Yeah.
So that's the big five that we talk about every single time are the main concerns and where you spend maybe a little bit extra care in investigating those.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, especially with foundation, there's a lot of tells.
Yeah.
Those are the things that we've got to keep in mind. Door sticking,
Yep.
or not latching, a window not opening and closing properly, cabinets separated.
And all that leads to you investigating the foundation a little bit further.
Absolutely, yeah. If we have any of the tells anywhere along the way, whether it's with the plumbing, if I'm looking at the meter and everything's turned off in the house and the meter's still running, there's a problem somewhere.
Right, you got a supply line leak somewhere in the home. Yeah.
Yep. And so that's where the investigation begins. Is there an issue with any one of those big five components, and then you've got to investigate further to try and figure out, maybe not the solution, but where else may that problem be arising.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, I tell people all the time, foundation, while expensive, doesn't even come close to a full repipe or a full re-roof.
Right.
Because foundations are often fixed for $5,000 to $7,000. A full repipe of a collapsed sewage system is $30,000.
Yeah.
And so therein lies even more investigative power when you start putting your sewer scope down in there, and when we tell people, hey, this sewer line's compromised, that's on the big five, and man, you better believe you got to do some more investigating, get a plumber out, get an estimate, and you can either completely excuse yourself from that deal because no one's willing to budge on the price,
Right.
or you can negotiate some sort of
Right.
replacement of the system.
Yeah, and that's what I tell the clients is that it's not the absolute end of the world by any means, because you do have two outs.
You can fix anything.
Yeah,
as well.
you can fix anything, and you've got two outs. And the other is that seller, if they want to sell that house, they need to do something about this problem.
Right.
Because now, especially now that there's been an inspection, this is public knowledge. It needs to be in the disclosure from there on out.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. We're talking about foundations getting repaired and then sending a sewer scope down into the sewer system. And my understanding, the reason we do that is because if a foundation is moved very slowly over time, the pipes tend to move very slowly with them. But when you correct the fact that the foundation is dropped rapidly, we're talking in one afternoon, you lift the whole thing, there's a substantial chance that you actually disconnect a sewer line. And while you fixed one problem, you may have created another problem. Is that accurate?
Absolutely.
And how would you go about figuring that out?
Well, the first thing is, and it's usually in the seller's disclosure, that there has been foundation work, or it certainly should be in the seller's disclosure, that there's been foundation work.
But you can find that too. You have a pretty good eye
Yes,
for it.
yeah. And there's telltale signs, mounds of dirt
Right.
around the foundation, or
Concrete
a trench,
patches,
or
yeah.
concrete patches. Any patches in the walls, the exterior walls between the bricks. You see, you'll see the
right, that zigzag line of new
we call
mortar.
step cracks.
Yeah.
And they filled it in with whatever patch they may be using. That's a good sign that there's probably been some foundation work. Anytime that there's ever been foundation work, I highly recommend a sewer scope.
Okay.
Because of exactly what you were just talking about, and in particular, cast iron. PVC is a little bit more flexible, but cast iron is like bones in your body. If you put enough pressure on them, they're going to break. And once you get that break, now you've got a slab leak, and that's going to compound things. And so your keen new fixed foundation is going to be shot again within a year because of your slab leak.
Because you're dumping water onto that soil.
Right.
You just repaired it. You just shored it up, and now you're eroding it all out. And
And another thing to keep in mind too about the foundation, and both cast iron and PVC, are what we call bellies. I see this a lot. I've seen it in brand new houses that haven't been moved into yet. And it's where the house has started to settle, and you get a little bit of a low spot in your PVC or cast iron, and which is what we call a belly. And those can be problematic down the line, especially if it's more than a quarter of an inch. If it's a quarter of an inch or less, and it's, you know, a span of 1 to maybe 2 feet, I'm not terribly concerned about it because it's going to have enough push to get through. But
it.
the more the belly and the deeper the water, the more it's going to hold solids and cause you problems down the road.
Makes perfect sense. So that's how you find it.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah, if you do the, if you know that the foundation has been repaired, investigate the plumbing.
Yep,
That's
that's
what I
one of the
learned
very first thing you want to do.
There we go.
So.
All right. Adam, why the heck do we use a zip level?
So zip level is to determine the foundation elevations.
Elevation, you mean one side is higher, one side's lower,
Correct.
perhaps?
Yes. Or it's a roller coaster.
Right. Or it's perfectly flat.
Yeah. Well, I've never come across one that was perfectly flat yet.
Which is why we use the tool.
Yes. Yeah. And it's very, very sensitive. It's very accurate. Mm-hmm. It's set to 1/10 of an inch, which is about the thickness of 3 business cards.
Okay.
So what we're looking for are TREC, which is Texas Real Estate Commission. They say the tolerance is 1 inch in every 20 feet.
So 20 feet distance, a house is allowed to move 1 inch
Correct.
in any direction.
Correct.
Okay.
Which I think is a little aggressive, personally. At that point, I'm going to still maybe suggest, you know, some further evaluation.
Right.
Because 1 inch and 20 feet is still fairly significant.
You drop a marble, it's rolling down the hill.
Right.
Yeah.
And I actually use that a lot. I use a golf ball.
Yeah.
Because it's
Put it on the ground and it rolls down.
It's not high tech, but it's very visually, explains it visually.
And you actually map the entire property. You draw it out,
Right.
and then you take that tool and you place it everywhere. So what are you doing when you took 0 in the center of the house?
Correct.
So what are you doing when you're mapping it out?
Well, first of all, we explained that the map is not, we're not architects, we're not designers, it's not to scale, it's a representation. So we get a representation of the house, you know, ideally they're square or rectangles.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases they're not. So we try and be as specific as possible. But then what we're doing is we're taking that I call it the mothership, the central box sits in the middle of the house, or as close to it as possible. A lot of times if there's a staircase or something in the middle, it just doesn't work. So it's off to the side a little bit. But so then we're taking the tool that's on a long cord that's filled, the cord is filled with liquid. Water always finds its level.
Yep.
So we're taking that device and we're going around the outer perimeter of the inside of the house. And, you know, again, we go about every 10, 15, 20 feet, whatever's, you know, a good representation all the way around the inside of the house.
So the whole house is then, you've dropped the monitor everywhere, and then you're writing down at each corner that you put it in how the house is flexing.
Correct. On a map that we've drawn on,
Right.
I use graph paper. So yeah, each individual, and the way I do mine so that there's a orientation is I mark the outer doors. Front door, back door, side door,
Got it.
garage. So you have a way to figure out where you are.
Yeah.
So, and you know, we're looking for variations in, you know, it's plus and minus. The other thing that has to be taken into account is different levels of flooring. If you're on tile and you go up to hardwood, or you're on hardwood and you go to carpet.
There's a variation in the height, so you have to account for that.
Correct.
Do some math.
Yes, math.
And then,
I hate mathing.
yeah, same. Because if you have a 1/2 inch increase because the carpet's thicker, then you have to add that into your equation when you mark it out, so that you
Or
give
subtract it.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Or give it, so you give us accurate representation of how the house is
Exactly.
actually. Otherwise, it's going to look like it's a 1/2 inch up over there. Yeah.
And it's real fun when you're doing a 1970s house and they have a sunken living room. I'm just like, oh. What I in a lot of cases, what I'll do then is actually 2 different grids.
Yeah,
So I'll mark that living room.
that makes sense.
So I'll have two areas where the mothership is, and so if that sunken living room is a square, then I'll do it separately from the rest of the house.
Gotcha.